today's webinar is about how to optimize your Amazon listings. And we're going to make an emphasis specifically on leveraging AMZScout. Because I think if you really know how to use the tool and combining with the techniques they're going to be talking you around the foundation of how to optimize a listing, you're going to have such a much easier journey on Amazon than your competitors. And let's be honest, on Amazon, it's all about what keywords you put on your listing. Because if you don't have the right keywords, you don't show for the right keywords. And if you don't show for the right keywords, the right consumer is not going to find you. And therefore, your revenue is not going to increase and your product is not going to scale through the ranks. So let's get started with the presentation with a brief introduction about myself. So my name is Vincenzo Toscano. I'm actually an Amazon seller. I've been selling the space for close to 9 years now, long time, almost pretty much when FBA was started. And then from there, I'm launching my own products and my own brands. I then transitioned into the consulting world. So given that I come from an engineering background, I used to work in the past for Rolls-Royce, for those love cars. I was working in the aerospace division, doing actually engines for airplanes. That's one of their expertise. And that's I was a consultant in that division. That's where I actually always had a passion for also teaching others. And as an Amazon seller, going to events, going to webinars like this, I discovered that gift, and then that's how it comes. It was funded. At the beginning, it was only myself. Now we're a team of over 80 people. I can't believe that it's actually so big, and our specialty is to help brands to scale on Amazon. So we do everything from A to Z. So we help essentially on the PPC, on the listing optimization, on the branding, on the front end, on the back end, everything that brand has to do to essentially succeed into this marketplace. And the nice thing of us is that given that our team is so big, we are spread globally. So we can help in Amazon USA, Amazon across Europe. We can even help you across in China. So anything that you need in terms of globally, we have the expertise. And as you can see on the screen, some of the figures speak by themselves. Like we have a portfolio over 100 for brands, over 9-figure in revenue, control and ad spend over 50 million. So we have a big understanding of what works, what doesn't work. And that's a lot of what we're going to be sharing today in the webinar. So let's dive into the topic, right? Which is, why optimization matters in 2025. Like why this is something that we need to keep putting focus, right? And the reason number one for that is that essentially when we have a look at Amazon as a marketplace, the dominance that Amazon is having across e-commerce is essentially taking pretty much over any other competitor out there. Like if you're not on Amazon 2025, you're not going to succeed as an e-commerce brand, because as you can see, 50% of the market is pretty much controlled by Amazon. And we're seeing that, the loyalty across Amazon with Amazon Prime is something that essentially you're not going to find in our marketplace. So the reason why this is important as an starting for today's webinar is that once you understand the power of Amazon, the reach it gives you, and essentially how much potential it's going to bring to your brand, you understand why it's more important than ever that you optimize your listings, because by optimizing your listing, you're going to have the maximum reach that the platform can bring to the table. Now, the first thing we have to understand is how the actual algorithm works. Because if we understand how the machine works, myself coming from an engineering background, we can reverse engineer it, understand the main elements, and understand, okay, this is what Amazon wants to see. These are the key elements that move the needle. And this is what I need to make sure my listings have to make sure that Amazon recommends me over the competition. And one of the most important things, guys, at the end of the day, that Amazon really values is some of the metrics associated with how your listing is perceived in the eyes of against your other competitors. And if we want to go deeper into some of these metrics, I'm going to mention a couple of them, but then across the following slides, I'm going to go deeper. The main thing, if you want me to summarize it to you, is conversion. If you don't convert the traffic that comes across your listing, you're going to have a very, very difficult time to actually essentially scale your brand on Amazon. Because Amazon essentially what it's doing is I'm putting your product in front of potential consumers. That traffic means money to me, because me as Amazon, I'm bringing this consumer to my platform, and you're wasting the traffic, because if your conversion is low, that means potential decline. Exit the Amazon app, the bot from another marketplace, and therefore you lost the sale, but me as Amazon also lost the sale. Okay, so they want to make sure that you maximize the traffic as much as possible. And once we understand that, conversion, essentially what we're going to use as the pillar for everything that we do as an optimization moving forward across our listings. So as we can see here in our screen, these are the main KPIs I usually focus on. Of course, CTR being the conversion, but that goes aligned with essentially better rankings, as you can see in my screen. Better rankings is really, guys, the objective of everything that we do on Amazon. If we don't achieve ranking, unfortunately, we're playing a game that we're gonna end up losing in a matter of time, because we as a brand cannot rely only on advertising. We need to make sure that our brand can be self-sufficient with the searches that are organically. And that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna understand which are those keywords, how we put those keywords within our listings, how we make sure conversion is at the highest peak, and from there, how do we make sure those activities associated with those keywords ensure we get the best ranking, which is what is gonna allow us to increase our revenue. So now let's get into how we get started in terms of the keyword research and how AMZScout can be part of that. So the first thing, of course, we have to understand with AMZScout is, the tool set that brings to the table. Like, one of the reasons I love AMZScout is how user-friendly it is, but also how easy it is to understand the data that comes from Amazon and reverse engineer that into your own listings. Like, throughout the whole webinar, I'm going to show you step by step how you're going to use it to extract the keywords, to understand the relevancy, how to make sure that you only focus on what actually is meaningful. Because a big mistake when it comes to listing optimization is, I'm sure most of you are right there or been on that position where you do a keyword research, you end up with 50, 100, 200, 300 keywords, and you think that all of them have to be part of your strategy and your listing copy, otherwise you're not going to win. But let me tell you, after doing this for so many years, from experience, usually revenue comes from 5 to 10 keywords. Of course, you're going to have revenue that comes from what we call long tail keywords, but the consolidation happens on those top 10 keywords, and we need to know which are those. And with tools such as AMZScout, we can do that very easy. And then, of course, from there, the rest is history in terms of making sure we combine or understanding our branding, how to make it look nice, and make sure we have the best of both worlds. Nice, good looking copy with images, but from a data-driven perspective that AMZScout can bring to the table. Now, what we're going to be using today is essentially these 4 tools, right? The first is going to be keyword search tool, because we need to, of course, try to identify which are the keywords that have the highest search volume, which are the most relevant. Then I also love the reverse ASIN lookup. This is the one I use the most, because at the end of the day, let's be honest, if you're going to actually do a strategy when it comes to selling on Amazon, what is the easiest place to go? You're going to try to look at who are the most successful people on that category. In the case of, for example, Christina, that she was mentioning, she does things in the dog space. I'm not going to go and actually start from very broad and try to guess the words. No, I'm going to go and see who are the dominant players in the dog trades, the one controlling the revenue and the traffic, and I'm going to reverse engineer, or like Jeff in the industrial and scientific. So by doing that, what I actually managed to achieve is I'm getting the answer where the money is. And by achieving that, I then put those keywords into my listing. Now, when it comes to drafting the listing, most of us, let's be honest, I'm not a copywriter. And that's something that, for most people, it's actually difficult to do on a nice, in terms of redacting something that looks very nice from a sales perspective. That's where AI Listing Builder comes into play. Then you can combine all that data, you can make it look very nice. And then, of course, the fourth thing is a pro database and tracker, because as we actually do all these changes that we're going to be talking today, we want to actually ensure that all that is tracked, because it's going to go all 2 ways if we do all these changes, optimize all these keywords, but we don't know the actual minimum of impact it's going to bring in terms of conversion, right? So now let's move into what are we going to be focusing to AMZScout. So one of the things I love the most if the approach of using a tool such as AMZScout, because I know some people might say, okay, what if I use something like ChatGPT or do it manually? You can, but it's not going to be data driven. So everything that you do when it comes to Amazon, as I told you, has to be data driven. Why? Because Amazon is based on an algorithm that is all around the metrics associated with how your listing is perceived in the sense of relevancy, but second of all, how it converts, and also how many sales you get on any given keyword. So if that is not taken consideration and you only focus on making a copy look nice or pretty, essentially you're missing the idea of what actually the whole listing optimization game is about. So how do we go into the research? Okay, the first one we're going to focus around is essentially understanding which are the search terms that we need to go for. These are all the keywords that our consumers are going to put in the search bar to look for products. The way that we find this, okay, is essentially by using our reverse async tool, which I'm going to show you some screenshots down the line. And essentially, you should recommend focusing on the top 10. So let's say an example of I'm going to use water bottle as an example. I'm going to use this, like this is a product I want to launch. I want to launch a water bottle. Therefore, I need to understand which are my top 10 keywords to go for. What I'm going to do, I'm going to find my top 10 sellers in the water bottle keyword, which is the main keyword. I'm going to find those products. I'm going to use the reverse async lookup, AMZScout, and from there, I'm going to find which are the top keywords to go for. Now, once I have all my keywords, you're going to go into the second step, which is type of keywords. You have your primary, secondary, and the backend. So primary keywords are keywords such as water bottle. Secondary keywords could be, rather than water bottle, it could be a water recipient for running. It's more long tail, more niche, and it requires more kind of refinement for the consumer. So it's secondary. It's not as direct to the product. And backend are things like, for example, which I recommend in the United States, like Spanish keywords or spelling mistakes. This allows you to also tap into these mini audiences that usually are not captivated to the main keywords. And the final thing is essentially also making sure that you take into consideration how you are going to put all these keywords without abusing the system. A lot of times what ends up happening is that if you put all the keywords you're going to find from the reverse async lookup into your listing and just keyword stuffing, as we call it, that's the worst thing you can do. Amazon's going to penalize you, like with the rollup or Rufus, which I'm sure is something you guys have already experienced. If you're just keyword stuffing and your information is not relevant enough, you're going to fall through the ranks, and your product, unfortunately, is essentially not going to rank as it should. So now, how are we going to use the whole process? The first thing is, and I'm going to explain step by step because I want to make sure this is as actionable as possible, so then you can go home and make sure you make this happen. So the first one is you're going to enter the main keyword. In this case, it's going to be in the example of water bottle, right? You're going to put that into essentially Amazon. And again, then down the presentation, I'm going to show you some screenshots. And what you're going to find in there is usually focus on things that define a winning keyword. What is a winning keyword? A winning keyword is a keyword that has a high search volume, a keyword that is consistent across multiple competitors, and also a keyword that is relevant. Once you achieve these three essential KPIs, that is going to be your winning keywords. And those are the keywords you need to make sure they are from a must perspective on your title, on your bullet points, and then of course the secondary and backend keywords are in the secondary places where you have any space left. Now, once we do the keyword research, right? Because remember, with Smart Scout, right, when you do the analysis, so once you do that analysis of the reverse async, what you're going to find is that essentially you're going to find from a competitor which are the keywords they're ranking for and which are the keywords they're generating revenue from. So usually what I recommend here as well is identify which are your top competitors. This is going to be in your specific niche. This is very easy with AMZScout. You can identify who are the ones bringing the most revenue, which are the ones controlling more specific keyword from a search for volume perspective. And with the reverse async, that's going to generate all the keywords that these competitors are ranking for. And therefore, those are the keywords you're going to put within your list. Now, let's go into crafting the list, right? So the most important thing is once we start identifying all these keywords that we're going to identify through essentially a keyword research tool or reverse async tool, and then we're also going to identify through the combination of creating the final pool of keywords, we need to proceed to drafting the listing. So when drafting the listing, the most important thing to take in consideration is how you place these keywords across all the listing. Okay, so this is very important, guys, because I see this mistake all the time. If everything I'm going to be showing you today, and then with the screenshots, I'm going to show you the technical side of it. you find the best keywords and you have the keywords that are going to bring the most revenue to your product, but then you don't make sure these are embedded within the listing itself in their correct location, it's going to also significantly impact how Amazon rewards how your product is ranked on the system. So the thing I usually recommend is, especially on your title, what you want to make sure is on the from the left to the right hand side of the title, you have your main keywords in there. So let's say you have 5 keywords that you know they are the most go for in terms of search volume. They always have to be at the beginning of your title from left to right, because that's how Amazon will analyze your listing in terms of keyword and ranking. The second thing you also want to make sure, especially now with the rollout of Rufus, is that the intention behind all the meaning of the title is actually from a perspective that will define who is the persona. So for example, let's say you are selling, in this is a specific example, right? Like we're selling the wireless noise canceling headphones. You can see how in here we also mentioned that quality for travel and work, right? Why do we mention that? And we are very specific about that because now Rufus is very focused into the intention of what the product is meant for. When people is now searching on Rufus, I want to find, for example, wireless noise canceling headphones that are specific for travel, specifically for work. And if you don't mention some of these key meaningful things on your title, Amazon is not going to recommend your product. So make sure you understand what are the top 2 to 3 usages that you need to make sure they are in your title, and then you combine that with the keywords that you're going to get from AMZScout in terms of from your keyword research and the reverse ASIN analysis. Now here we can also see the bullet points kind of overview. When it comes to this, here a lot of people do the mistakes when it comes to bullet points as well, of just using this for, as a graveyard to put all the keywords they didn't manage to put on your title, right? To do keyword stuffing. And unfortunately, those days are over. On the bullet points, what we also need to ensure, as I show you then with the screenshots how you're going to gather all those keywords, you need to make sure that the actual meaning behind each of these bullet points is actually, from a syntax perspective, is actually conveying the right idea in terms of what this product is meant to be useful, right? So for example, in the headphones previous slide, if the concept is all about, for example, using this for work or travel, what do you think the bullet point has to be about? It's about how you're feeling when you're traveling. You feel that when you're traveling, you are having an amazing experience of not affecting your sound quality and still be able to be on a train and enjoying your favorite songs. Or for example, you can also mention how while having meetings, you can make sure you can have a proper kind of sound quality during your Google meetings without affecting the quality of work. So those are all the reasons why you will buy a headphone like this. You need to reflect what the person will feel, what is the actual lifestyle that will affect, and that will make sure that when somebody's using Rufus and say, I want headphones that when I'm working on my office, will make sure that I don't hear, for example, my coworkers. If you mention down your bullet points, now your listing is going to be recommended over your competitor that is only focusing on putting as many keywords as possible, which is the old way of optimizing listings on Amazon. Now, the backend is another important thing I want to bring as a foundation, because the backend at the end of the day is such a hidden gem, because in here you can put things that you can usually not put in the front end. This would be things such as, for example, a generic kind of spelling mistakes that will be reflective of your category, different languages, things that sometimes sentences that are not the best in terms of punctuation, but you know they still must be into that specific listing for discoverability. So all these are elements that are key, and we need to make sure that we leverage the backend. When I say backend, by the way, it's not only search terms, it's also what we call the flat file. If you never heard what is a flat file is the manual approach for you to optimize a listing on Amazon. Essentially, you can download this from your catalog report, and then within there, you're going to see usually attributions that most people won't never optimize. These are things such as the color, for example, a type, or the material, or the size, or things that have to do with very specific technicalities of the product, which you may assume it will take a lot of work to fill and most people avoid it. But go to Amazon right now, and you're gonna see that on the left hand side there's filters. And trust me, a lot of people use those filters. Filter could be down to a material, a certification, things that would have to be relevant to that specific category. And if you don't fill those attributions in the back end, your product is just not going to be appearing under this filter. So make sure you cover this as much as possible so you can maximize the level of discovery. Now, as we talk about listing optimization, then we go into the technicalities. I want to briefly touch on the listings in terms of the images side of things, because we can do everything that we want when it comes to keywords. We can have the best keywords in the title and the bullet points in the backend and have the best work from an SEO perspective. But all this is going to go to waste if we don't have the right images. Images is essentially the way people test a product or feel a product, because they are buying to a screen, right? They cannot interact with the product. They need a way artificially to imagine how this product looks in their hand, how it's going to affect their life. Like, they really need to perceive themselves having this product into day-to-day, right? And that's why I would say, if you ask for my advice, invest the most amount of money on your images. And the good thing, there are so many tools out there using AI that can do studio quality images in a matter of minutes. Like, when I started 9 years ago, I wish I had that. I spent thousands and thousands of dollars on photographers and models here and there. Now it's never been easier to have very nice images. Just invest the time, there's different tools, and you're going to see that you're going to find potentially the right ones that are going to portray the brand from the right perspective in terms of customer eyes. And that's going to allow you to also compete in price. That's going to allow you to compete from other generic products and really stand from the crowd, because the better your main image is, and I can tell you this because we have done thousands of studies on this, the better your main image is, the more click-through rate you're going to get, and that has a significant impact on your revenue and your profitability. So master your main image. Use tools to also do A/B testing, or, for example, Amazon experiments, and that's going to make it much more easier for you to navigate essentially the scale of a product on Amazon. Now, something I like to put in here is, right now I mentioned a bit the foundation of the images, but let me mention what type of images you need to have, right? The first one is a contextual kind of photography. So here is, you want to make sure the product is perceived in real life, how the person is using this product during camping, during a sport, during dinner, swimming, whatever is the activity. Because we humans need to see other people using the product to then imagine ourselves in that situation. And that's how sales happen, right? You need to sell the dream. You need to sell essentially how they feel with that product in their hands, right? And that's why the mistake I see hundreds of times by sellers is they keep the images very generic. Essentially, generic is only the white background, some dimensions, some basic text, and that's really not going to make it. Not going to make the cut, especially in 2025 when people is being very savvy when it comes to images. Infographic is another big thing. As you guys been seeing throughout the presentation, been creating a strong foundation about how having the right context and meaning on your bullet points title is key. The same with images. Now with Rufus, Amazon is able to read the text on your images. And not only the text on your images, by the way, also the elements on your images. So, for example, the background that you have in the image, the persona you have in the image, objects. So why this is more important than ever? Because let's say you're selling a water bottle, and in your images, all your examples are people using a water bottle while running, and that's it. But nobody on a mountain or doing hiking, or let's say your niche is outdoors. Then when somebody's looking for a water bottle for outdoors or for hiking, your product is never going to be recommended, because in your infographics, you never reflected that element. So very, very important. That's taken into consideration. And the third element is video. Video is such an underutilized element. Like, if you actually go right now and analyze some of your main keywords, you're going to find that most of the time the people running video ads is the same people over and over again. Why? Because most people, first of all, is not aware that this is possible, or they don't have a brand racer with Amazon, or simply they just stick with the traditional sponsored product campaign. Talking now very quickly here about advertising. But coming back to listings, having a video on your listing on average increase your conversion by 10%. That's huge. Imagine that means you can go from selling, let's say you're doing $10,000, from $10,000 to $11,000-$12,000, like $1,000 to $2,000 extra just by putting a video. Who wouldn't do that, right? So that's why you need to make sure videos are in your listing. And again, with AI, is easier than ever. Just make sure you transmit the right emotion, the right elements, and you invite people to essentially buy your products. Now, some of the things I love to use AMZScout for is tracking, right? Because as we go deeper now into the technicalities and how to do this keyword research and how this tool works, you need to be able to measure impact. Because if you know the impact of a change you're doing from an image perspective, the impact you're doing from a keyword perspective, how do you even know you're going the right direction? So with AMZScout, you can measure all these KPIs. So that means you can understand what is the impact on your impressions and your click-through rate. And this is something, guys, as we move forward now, I start showing you how everything is implemented. I need you to make sure this is done, because if you don't make sure you measure the before and after, you're going to be running blindly. And at the end of the day, all this will go to waste, because how you will know in the first place whatever you're doing is actually moving the business in the right direction, right? So now, things I recommend you guys to measure as we start doing this together. So the first one would be your BSR. BSR is a direct correlation to sales, and that's a correlation to your conversion rate. And that is going to be your North Star when it comes to everything we're going to be doing today together. Because let's say I change the title or I change my image. What does it happen before and after? Do I get more clicks? Do I get less clicks? Do I get more sales? Do I get better ranking? All this is going to be answered throughout all these KPIs. And I think at the end of the day, it's important for you to have a benchmark. That's another issue I see a lot on Amazon. How will you actually react as an entrepreneur in terms of being proactive if you don't know where you even stand in the first place? You need to know how you compare against your competition, how much they're converting on a certain keyword, how they're ranking on a certain keyword, how much revenue they do on a certain keyword. So make sure with AMZScout Pro research tools, you understand the baseline of some of these competitors, and you use that as the foundation for anything that you do moving forward. Now, as we start diving into how to come or put all these listings together, reviews is going to be your best friend. Why? Nowadays, you can very easily now, and actually with AMZScout you can do now with the AI tool, you can extract all the reviews from your competitors. You can understand all the wins, all the weak points, and all the things that people would like some of this product to improve. And essentially now you have the answer to what you have to mention in your copy and images to essentially convince your potential consumer to choose you over the competition. So now you have exactly the perfect pitch kind of proposal. Now it's a matter of you reflecting this from a copy perspective, from an image perspective, but this is a no-brainer. As we combine all the technicalities of finding the right keywords, you need to make sure you also understand what are the things that your images and your copy have to answer to make sure that your product stays as the most relevant. Now, another thing that is going to make sure your listing gets, of course, the most traffic is going to be pricing. This is also very utilized kind of strategy when it comes to making sure we can improve the overall revenue that we get through our listings. Because if you don't split test your pricing, how do you even know that that's a perfect pricing? How many times, and most of you, I welcome you to actually have this internal thought. When was the last time you changed your price since you launched? Of course, some of you might have done vouchers or promotions, but most of you, if you launch at $20, most of you will stay at $20, and you need to split test that. You will be surprised how sometimes $1 or a few cents can make the difference, sometimes based on perception as well. So I recommend you every 30 days test the price. Go more expensive, don't be afraid. I actually had a product myself. I was selling the product, I remember, $28.99, and the average of the market was $24.99. So I was already one of the most expensive. And one day I said, you know what? I want to test what happens if I go and perceive myself as the Apple, as the most premium. I went from $28.99 to $39.99, almost like we're talking $12 jump. I was like $15 on average more expensive than the rest. My sales skyrocketed. Why? because that's where sometimes we undervalue the psychology of how humans work. Like if your product sometimes the most expensive as well, you also get the perception that your product is the best one, and that could actually improve your sales. So don't be afraid of increasing the price. And sometimes if you have to decrease it, I understand sometimes you have to because your product could be close to a commodity, but if that's not the case, try to increase, especially now with tariff, is definitely a must, and you should be trying that. Now, when it comes to the tips, right, is how we start leveraging AI here to make this moving forward, right? I will say some of the things I love the most when it comes to leveraging the AI that we're gonna be discussing throughout the following slides about AMZScout is really making sure you can output the most customized message that you can by combining data and the background behind essentially who is your perfect consumer. Because as we've already been discussing throughout the whole webinar, with AMZScout, we're going to be able to analyze with AI all the reviews of our competitors. We're going to find all the pain points, all the things that we have to focus when it comes to pitching in terms of our copy and images. Now, from a keyword perspective, we have all the keywords we have to go for. We understand what the keywords have to be in the title and the bullet point. Essentially, the only thing missing is us as the founder giving the direction to this AI in terms of the data and the market and what I want to achieve with the brand. And now you can move 10 times faster than what you could have done when I started 9 years ago, that all this had to some extent be guesswork. Now there's no guesswork. You have the data, and it's a matter of understanding it and implementing it. Now, some of the things I would recommend as well, and we're going to be showing you how this will look on the platform as well. Make sure you set alerts as this comes along, because what you're going to find is that as we monitor all this, and this goes a little bit related to the KPIs, you need to understand how this influence essentially your listing discoverability. Because what you're going to find is that especially most of you are going to have 10 to 20 keywords we're going to work on, and then we're going to put across our copy. So we need to make sure that that's tracked in terms of you understand if you're ranking higher, if you're not ranking higher. What is the competition doing, by the way? Competition evolves as you evolve. They change pricing. They do a new product. They actually, with the seasonality, the whole market has a shift. And if you don't consider that, that can be very harmful for you. So maintain the edge, understand what is happening with the before and after, and with the tracking of the changes, you can be proactive when it comes to a contingency plan. Now, this start coming to a conclusion in terms of the basics before we jump into technicality. So this was an induction in terms of what has to be done in terms of from an implementation point of view. But the main takeaway in terms of that is the data-driven approach. You need to understand which are the keywords to go for. Make sure they are on your title, your bullet points, and description. Combine that with the insert from reviews of your competitors, so everything is from an intention point of view and really reflecting the lifestyle of who is the persona that would buy your product. So Rufus keeps recommending your product over and over again over your competition. Use images to essentially tell a story about why your product is better from a lifestyle perspective, infographic perspective, and also communicate that intention to Rufus that use image processing that your product is the right fit for that consumer. And the final thing is essentially making sure all this comes together into a proactive way with AMZScout. Now, let's talk about the AI extension. So you start understanding how these tools work, and you understand how you can put them into implementation. So the AI extension, something that I love about, is essentially understanding all the kind of trends associated with a product. Now, from this perspective, you're gonna be able to understand the trends, the cost associated with it, and something I love, which you can see on one of the screenshots, is the calculator. You are going to be able to now fully understand, once you choose a product, what is going to be the fees associated with this product. And this is key, because if you don't know your margin, guys, and I see this mistake every single day, it can be very tough for you to scale the brand. You're not going to know what you need to allocate for advertising. You're not going to know what's the ideal price point, and then from a cash flow perspective, you're going to struggle. So this tool gives you the trends, what is happening from a competitive perspective, and the full economics that you need to make a decision. Now, how we combine that essentially with insights of what the AI brings together. As I mentioned, once you start doing all this research from a keyword perspective, you're also going to analyze your competitors. And analyzing of the AI product insight that you get from AMZScout is that it's going to tell you all the opportunities that you essentially can leverage. Going back to my advice with the reviews, this is actually very, very important when you optimize your listing. As you can see here, the tool will tell you what are the strengths of the competitor, the weaknesses, and some rationale in terms of how you can make the product better. You can bring all this together with the AI product tool and start drafting copy that creates objections to every single of this point to essentially explain to your consumer why your product is better than the competition. So you have the answer. You have the answer what the consumer needs to read to make the decision of buying your product. Just a matter of using this data and putting it together. Now here, another thing that I love, because I know I get this question a lot, is how do I know actually this is a good product or not? Like, I mean, of course, there are many things that you have to take in consideration if you do it manually, but imagine now, in this case with AMZScout, we give you the score. We will tell you exactly if it's a good score or not. As you can see in the screen, you're going to be able to understand if it's low competition, if it's high sell, disadvantages. And this is going to be game changer for a lot of you, because especially let's say you're going to optimize your listings, right? And while you're optimizing your listing, you also need to understand sometimes some of the benefits of your product from the perspective of why this is a good niche in the first place. You can reverse engineer this and use those benefits into your copy as well as a selling perspective. So it gives you an understanding 360 of what you need to do in terms of the product and also the optimization that you have to do. The other thing I love is this one, which is the Pro AI extension. The nice thing of this one is it allows you to essentially find products. So this one I also use it for listing optimization, because as you know, if you're optimizing your copy, sometimes you're going to struggle to find who are your main competitors or who are the products you need to focus on. So I sometimes use this tool to identify which are the products I should be going for, and then reverse engineer this product with the reverse async lookup, right? But this is the perfect place not only to understand who your competitors are, but also you could even use this on advertising. With this tool, you could extract all the main competitors of a specific niche and make sure they're part of, for example, if you guys are doing advertising of your sponsored product async targeting campaigns. And it's the keyword research I was mentioning, guys. So for example, one of the things I love to do is put in my main keyword. In the example I was giving you, a water bottle, see what are some of the relatable keywords that will come out of that. And then using the filters, again, we'll make sure on the video, on the walkthrough that we have done for you, we'll show you how to do that, you know, step by step, how you can go from identifying some of the top 100 keywords, which is what most of you will potentially end up, 100 to 200 keywords, to niching down to those 20 to 30 keywords that are really going to help you apply the 20-80 rule. Those 20% of the keywords that drive 80% of the revenue and are really the most impactful. And then another thing essentially I wanted to show you a screenshot is the reverse async one. You remember how I was telling you that as part of the methodology to find my main keywords, I will use the reverse async lookup. This is what you're going to end up with. You're going to have essentially put in the async of one of the competitors, or you could even open the tool within Amazon itself. You can reverse async essentially the top people that are ranking on your main keyword, and it will tell you exactly which of the keywords you're ranking the highest for, and you understand everything in terms of the search volume, the CPC, average sales. And this essentially is also super important, because how are you going to choose the keywords? You're going to choose the keywords by understanding which of the keywords that bring the most sales to your competitors, because if you know that if you also end up there, you're going to potentially be selling some of those sales. So that's the thought process behind all this. And the keyword tracker, this is something, I know I make a lot of emphasis on this, but the reason for that, because everything I've been mentioning in terms of keyword research and then reverse async analysis will go to some extent to waste if you don't make sure then after you do the optimization, you track everything from A to Z. Because as you can see on the screen, once you do those changes on your listing and you have everything that I teach you today in terms of having the right copy, the right images, conveying the right message, be super relevant for your audience, you want to see how your keywords fluctuate. Are you going to ranking higher? Are you not going to rank at all? And by making sure your ranking improve and you're moving in the right direction, that means that the work you're doing is actually paying off, and you need to double down. On some instances, which could be the case, it could mean that unfortunately those changes actually are more negative, and that's actually a good kind of alert for you to go back to the foundation and essentially redesign. Thank you so much for being here.